Hi, Doctor, and to all that watching our video. So we would like to introduce about our group project, which is I Wonder from Group 7. So let's begin. First, I would like to introduce to our teammates, which is me, Irfan, Jiva, Ami, Zahiruddin, Raga, and lastly, Ethan. So our presentation overview include introduction, methodology, analysis, result, discussion, limitation, and suggestion, and conclusion. Next, I will pass the floor to Jiva.
Okay, let me introduce you to our project. So what are the research gaps that we have? So first of all, AI-generated images are increasingly indistinguishable from real photos. There are lack of research on eye tracking patterns in detecting AI versus real images. And also, gender-based visual processing differences still remain very underexplored. And the research questions we're going to answer are there any significant eye movement differences when viewing AI versus real images? Do this pattern relate to detection accuracy? And finally, do males and females show different eye patterns in this context? So objective of our project is measure metrics like fixation time, time to first fixation, and fixation count for AI versus real images, and also compare visual attention patterns between male and female participants. So the hypothesis that we're going to have, the first set will be null hypothesis will be there will be no significant differences in each case. The alternative hypothesis will be there are some differences such as more time spent on AI generated and AI images receive faster first fixation. For the second set, the null hypothesis will be there are no significant difference between both genders. And the alternative hypothesis will be there are some differences in metrics, such as total fixation on faces with a background, or maybe differences in average fixation duration. So moving on, the contribution of our project will be provide insights into cognitive processing of AI versus real images via eye tracking, and also explores gender-based differences in image perception. The real-world application of our project is deepfake and misinformation detection, and also it helps to enhance AI model interpretability through human visual patterns. Now our next member will continue.
Next, we move on to the methodology. So to begin with, the participant of Gen AI project had around 87 students, consist of 57 males and 30 females. All participants had normal vision and gave informed consent. Moving on to the materials, we used 6 pairs of images, AI generated and real, which were displayed using Tobii Eye Tracker 5. And then for the analysis, we used Tobii Pro Lab and Will Collect. As for the procedure, after a short briefing and then a 9-point calibration, participants reviewed the images, and then throughout the session, eye tracking data such as position and scan path were recorded. And finally, we analyze the data to identify visual patterns based on images types and participant gender. And next.
All right, now moving on to analysis, we will run some statistical tests and analysis. But before that, we will need to do some pre-processing, which is we need to create labels and participant variable on each participant, which is we need to label them, and then we need to create custom event timeline for each images, and lastly to draw relevant AOI for each images. So first of all, we want to study about difference in visual attention between AI and real images. So we need to choose our metrics, which is total duration of fixation, number of fixation, time to first fixation, and number of visit. So next is we need to establish some assumption, which is participant will showcase the general visual attention pattern across all 6 paired images. And the second one is the image specific effect for each paired images does not play a crucial role in participant visual attention pattern. And lastly, hypothesis test. We have 3 hypotheses that we will prove. So next, moving on. This is a simple overview. We have a table of summary of the metrics, but overall AI-generated images drew more attention, visual attention, but further statistical tests are needed to confirm this finding and support our hypothesis. So the first hypothesis, we assume that we want to prove that participants will allocate more time observing AI-generated images compared to the real images. So we use a Wilcoxon sign rank test on total duration of fixation, which show us that the p-value is less than the set confidence level of 0.05. So next is we run a PET-T test on a number of fixation metrics, and it shows that the p-value is also less than 0.05, which indicates that the participant do allocate more time observing AI-generated images compared to the real images. Next is the second hypothesis. We want to prove that participants are more fixated on AI-generated images than the real images, and we run a Wilcoxon sign rank test on time to first fixation, which also show us that the p-value is less than the set confidence level of 0.05, which indicate to us that participants do fixated more on AI-generated images than the real images. And lastly, the third hypothesis, we want to prove that participants are more prone to revisit AI-generated images than the real images. So we run a Wilcoxon sign rank test yet again, because the data is not distributed normally on the matrix of number of visits, and we find that the p-value is actually larger than the set confidence level of 0.05, which indicates to us that there are no difference in terms of number of visit between the AI generated images and the real images. Now moving on, I will pass to Raga. So now for the second research question, we basically focus on the visual attention of different genders between AI generated and real images. So the metrics that we utilize for this is total fixation duration, average fixation duration, fixation count, time to first fixation, and number of visits. So what are we going to be focusing on? We'll be focusing on the area of interest comprising of facial features and backgrounds. So for the hypothesis test, 5 hypotheses are generated and each hypothesis will be tested using statistical tests that suit best for the metrics. So here's a simple overview of all the results that we received. So only 4 out of the 35 comparisons showed statistically significant gender differences, with all indicating that male participants exhibited longer or more frequent fixations. Contrary to the original hypothesis that females would show greater attention to facial features, the data reveal limited and inconsistent support for gender-based visual attention differences. So for the first hypothesis, we basically hypothesized that male and female participants will differ in total fixation duration on facial features and background elements. Since all the data here is not distributed normally, we use a Mann-Whitney U test. And only one of the tests yielded a statistically significant result, which is the background elements for the 5th pair. So for the second hypothesis, we hypothesized that male and female participants will differ in the average fixation durations on facial features and background elements. This, on the other hand, yielded 2 statistically significant results where facial features were more focused on or were very differently focused on in the first pair, and background elements were very differently focused on in the 6th pair. And while this has more results, it is still not enough to support the hypothesis. For the third hypothesis, basically hypothesized that male and female participants will differ in fixation count on facial features and background elements. This also only yielded one statistically different result in the 5th pair for the background elements. For the fourth hypothesis, there was no statistical significance at all in terms of the time to first fixation on facial features or background elements between male and female participants. So for the last hypothesis, we hypothesized that female participants will revisit facial features more frequently than males, and this yielded no statistical significant difference results at all either.
Moving on to the result, this is a compare result for research question number 1. Next, this is a compare result for research question number 2. And this is to discuss on the result. So first, for first research question, participants visit longer and more frequently on AI-generated image. Why this is happening? Maybe because there are some imperfections in AI images, unnatural textures, lighting inconsistency, facial distortions that may cause visual uncertainty. So this may cause the brain to spend more time examining the AI images, although we not always consciously notice. So, and the next point is that there's no significant difference in how many times participants revisited AI versus real images. So this implies that both type of images were equally likely to be looked at again. And the last key point is that gaze was directed slightly faster to AI images, but the difference was minimal. Why this is happening? Because real images were likely processed more fluently because we're familiar with the natural human features. Next is that we will discuss on the research question number 2 result. We found out that males visit longer and more often on background elements and specific facial features in certain image pairs. For the background one, the possible explanation is that male might have a wider viewing approach, which they pay more attention to the background and surrounding to identify fake images. Next, the result also contrasts with the initial expectation that females would focus more on facial features. And however, since this pattern were inconsistent and not statistically strong, we cannot conclude that gender had a meaningful influence on visual behavior. Thus, we can conclude that gender had minimal influence on eye movement patterns when differentiating AI generated from real images. Next.
However, there were few limitations to our project. Firstly, limited sample diversity, broad image variation, limited statistical significance, and manual AOI labeling. And next, our future work suggestions are to utilize larger and more diverse sample, apply machine learning, add more eye tracking metrics, and also include qualitative feedback. To conclude things, we studied how 87 students visually process AI-generated images versus real images using Tobii Eye Tracker 5. They viewed paired images across nature, portraits, and objects, and these are the shown metrics. It showed that the AI-generated images, they drew more attention overall, and gender differences were minimal and consistent. Next. These are our references. And lastly, acknowledgement. We'd like to thank Doctor for continuous guidance in our research. Also thank the staff for preparing all the materials, and also our fellow classmates who participated in our data collection. Thank you.
That's all for us. Thank you.